Hi guys, so today we're going to be talking about bird flu, avian influenza. And here in the UK, we've actually got an avian influenza protection zone, AIPZ, in place because there's been some outbreaks. There's been outbreaks of two different strains, H5N2 and H5N8, I think. I will clarify that shortly. Now, if you live in the UK and you keep lots of birds, over 50, you actually have to report the fact that you keep that many birds to DEFRA. They inform you when there is an incident like this taking place. So we've had an email from DEFRA telling us what we need to do and what everyone needs to do. Really, this has been on the news. So, you know, if you keep birds, this does affect you. It doesn't matter if you have one goose, one turkey, or like us, over 100 birds. You need to take action. Now, there's nothing to be worried about. You don't need to panic because these two strains of bird flu, they are not of significant risk to humans. So I'm going to tell you a few of the things that we're doing differently and some of the things that you should probably consider. And I'm going to talk through because I've got the email from DEFRA in front of me here on my wife's phone, and I'm going to talk to you about some of the significant bits of information that are contained within it. Now, the broadest piece of advice, the broadest piece of guidance is that what we're trying to do is we're trying to make our areas that hold our hens look less attractive to wild birds, because it's the wild birds that are going to be spreading this pathogen. It's the wild birds that are going to bring this pathogen into your flock. So, as you guys all know, and I'll show you again, we tend to use these treadle feeders. Now, these treadle feeders hold the feed in such a way that it can't be accessed by wild birds. There's a platform that the chickens have to stand on to access the feed, and wild birds literally can't get it. Even the larger wild birds like crows and things wouldn't weigh enough to set off the treadle. I'll just move over here a little bit so you can see the birds accessing it, and as you can see, they stand on it and that opens up a little hatch that allows them to get to the food. They wouldn't be able to get to it without it. The other thing we do, as you know, another significant portion of our birds' diet is made up with table scraps and things like bread. Now, what we've done is we've stopped just throwing that in. We're now putting that in a more traditional feeder. This big red feeder back here. This is where my wife has been putting the bits of bread and the treats that they might have, because again, that makes it less appealing to wild birds. The other thing you might want to consider, and one of the pieces of advice that is recommended, is to actually remove wild bird feeders, particularly from the areas that you've got hens in. When it comes to water, we've moved our chickens' water inside the houses, and of all the things we're doing, that's the one that's probably a little bit more work, a bit fiddly and a bit more work to maintain it, but it's part of what you need to do. Now, another step that's recommended, we haven't put in place yet, but we will, is we're going to get a big washing up bowl and we're going to fill it with disinfectant, basically as a foot wash, so my wife can put her welly boots in it before she comes in and leaves to stop this pathogen from spreading, because you can pick this up from the droppings of wild birds in the rest of your garden. Now, for the larger commercial places that have birds, if you've got more than 500 birds, the biosecurity measures are actually quite strict. They're basically in lockdown, so only essential workers can access these sites now. These sort of restrictions aren't being placed on the rest of us yet, but who knows, they could place further restrictions on the backyard chicken owner. And if they do, then it's going to be things like your birds will need to be kept in a confined space, somewhere with a roof, somewhere that birds can't get into, wild birds. We've got quite a reasonable amount of netting, and if it comes to it, we'll have to rig up some kind of roof over our outdoor space. We just don't have enough indoor space. We don't have any outbuildings here. So we'll have to cross that bridge if and when we come to it. Perhaps we could use the polytunnel to house some of them. At this time of year, it's not going to be too hot in there. Who knows? We'll have to figure that out if and when we get there. So basically, to read directly from the government's advice here, it says, whether you just keep a few birds or a few thousand birds, you're now legally required to meet enhanced biosecurity requirements. And this is in your interests to do, to protect your birds from this highly infectious disease. So I want to reiterate now, it's highly infectious between birds, but that's not the case for human transmission. And I'll speak a little bit more about that in a second. The prevention zone means bird keepers across the country, and that means England for sure, and they have basically got the whole of the United Kingdom to agree to these measures as well. Ensure that areas where birds are kept are unattractive to wild birds, for example, netting ponds and by removing wild bird food sources. So again, I spoke about that in two different ways. One, by reducing the availability of your bird feed, and secondly, by reducing specific wild bird feed from those areas. Again, it's about not attracting them in. Feed and water your birds in enclosed areas to discourage wild birds. Minimize movement in and out of bird enclosures. Now, we have to come in here once a day, so I've taken the opportunity of when we're coming up here anyway to collect the eggs and do the feed to make this footage. So you don't want to be going in and out any more than you have to. Again, it's about transmission of that infection on the soles of your shoes. Clean and disinfect footwear and keep areas where birds live clean and tidy. Reduce any existing contamination by cleansing or disinfecting concrete areas and fencing off wet or boggy areas. So a lot of common sense stuff, a lot of husbandry stuff, a lot of stuff you'd probably do periodically anyway, but you just want to be that little bit more sensitive to it at the moment. So the prevention zone will be in place until further notice, and there'll be regular reviews. So there's quite a bit of really good information there, I think. I want to follow up now with some of the actual science and the actual outbreaks here. So there's been wild birds, a wild goose in Stroud near Gloucestershire, which isn't a million miles away from where we are here. It's probably about an hour and a half drive, maybe 2 hours drive. And a swan in Dawlish in Devon, which again is within 2 hours drive from here. And they both tested positive for the H5N8 strain. And there was a goose in Weymouth, which is even closer, that also tested positive for the same strain. Now, there was a small commercial premises in Kent which tested positive for the H5N2 strain. So these are two slightly different strains. And there were 2 further cases of the H5N8 strain in commercial premises. Now, in all of these commercial premises, all of the birds had to be culled. And we're talking thousands of birds. So it is something that we should all be taking seriously. That being said, the chance of transmission to human is exquisitely low. It's really super rare. So it's only people who are in direct contact with thousands of birds for a tremendously high amount of time that really have to worry about that kind of risk. But it's more about transmission from bird to bird that we need to worry about. And of course, while we think, well, our flocks aren't coming into contact with other hens, it's the wild birds that we need to be thinking about. So there you go. That's what you need to do. That's what you legally need to do if you're in the UK, and it's what you might need to do elsewhere when these epidemics come into the areas that you're in. So some food for thought there. I hope you found it useful, and I will speak to you guys soon. Please make sure, if you find these videos valuable, that you press that like button, leave a comment down below, and subscribe to our channel. What's more, you can also tune into our podcast, which is every Monday, Wednesday and Friday. That's the Self-Sufficient Hub podcast. Thanks for watching. Speak to you guys soon.